Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlie Bender, and I'm a staff engineer here at AIST, the Association for Iron and Steel Technology. Welcome to our decarbonization webinar. We are still waiting for a few more attendees to come into the active software, and we'll go through a little bit of an introduction in just a moment. This is a sixth in a series of decarbonization webinars. Today's title is Green Steel Labeling, and all have been organized by AIST's Decarbonization Subcommittee. Several guidelines for AIST during these webinars include that each of your audios have been disabled, as we are encouraging questions to be sent through the Q&A feature of this Zoom software. Both our host and moderator will determine which questions are attempted to be answered live. The session is being recorded and will be available for demand and replay on AIST's website. Just a reminder that photos or recording of the presentation is prohibited, and if you do have technical difficulties, please contact us through this email address, training@aist.org. AIST has two guiding guidelines for both antitrust and anti-harassment activity. The guidelines are here to support the United States antitrust laws and to eliminate collusion between competitors. Our anti-harassment policy is designed to have a comfortable experience for every attendee. All participants will be asked to stop harassing behavior and are expected to comply immediately. If a participant is violating this policy, they may be sanctioned or expelled from this event or AIST membership at the discretion of AIST leadership. Just again, a reminder, should you have a question for either presenter, please put it through the Q&A part of the software, which you'll find at the bottom or the top of the screen. And if you are having technical problems, please email us at training@aist.org. Just a little bit of a background, the AIST Decarbonization Webinar Series has the following titles and really has been building over the last 3 years. Each of these can be found on the AIST website for replay. At this point, I'd like to take the time to introduce our first moderator, Dr. Anand Makwana. Anand currently is the chair of our Energy and Utilities Technology Committee, and he's a member of the AIST Decarbonization Liaison Task Force. At Air Products, he is the head of Global Technology Lead for Metals and Minerals, and he holds a PhD from Penn State University in the field of combustion science. He also holds in excess of 10 patents or patent applications and in excess of 10 journal papers and conference articles in the science of combustion. Recently, he's been selected by the National Academy of Engineering, NAE, 2024 U.S. Frontiers of Engineering Symposium. Anand, I will turn over the presentation to you for introduction of our first presenter.
Thanks, Charlie. I would like to start with a brief background of the Decarbonization Technology Subcommittee. The DSC, as we call, is a subcommittee of the Energy and Utilities Technology Committee, and it was established in 2021. And since then, it enjoys being a part of linking different technology committees and AISTech in general for addressing the global challenge of decarbonization in our iron and steel industry. One important aspect of DSC is to plan webinars on critical decarbonization topics. With respect to today's webinar on green steel labeling, this session was prepared in response to steel industry's interest in understanding the experiences and challenges associated with this topic. The first webinar today, or the presentation, is Green Steel Labeling, High-Level Picture of Main Initiatives Worldwide. We are fortunate to have Claire Broadbent with us. She'll be presenting on this topic. Claire is the head of sustainability at World Steel Association. Claire leads the sustainability program at World Steel, focusing on issues throughout the full value chain and representing the industry in international forums, especially the many initiatives aiming to build demand for low carbon emission steel. Claire began her career with British Steel in 2000 after graduating with a first-class honors degree in environmental engineering. She worked at Eurofer for 2 years on integrated product policy before moving to World Steel in 2007, where she leads the industry's life cycle analysis or LCA program. With that, I would like to invite Claire to begin her presentation.
Hey, hello and good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Claire from the World Steel Association, and it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the green steel labelling and to give you an overview of many of the different initiatives that are taking place worldwide, focusing on this topic. So the World Steel Association is an association of steel producers around the world. So we have some of you on the line today will be members of World Steel. For those of you who are making steel, we also have national and regional steel associations who are members, and then other related associations and specific bodies who are involved in the steel industry. So we really represent around 85% of global steel production. So it's important that we keep abreast of things that are happening on a global level, but also in specific regions. So the topic today is we're really looking at the topic of climate change and greenhouse gas and CO2 emissions. And there is really a humongous interest in how we transition the steel industry from where we are today to an industry with a lot fewer greenhouse gas emissions. And we've seen since 2019, there's been a multitude of international initiatives specifically related to climate change and the steel industry have come about and have been launched, and they're spanning across all different types of stakeholders. The initiatives all aim to assist the industry and policymakers, spanning all aspects of the value chain of the steel industry. So it's quite key that we are there to help support these initiatives that are out there. However, the problem is that there are really a huge number of these different initiatives which are proliferating around the world and are all in different sectors. And this is just here an overview of some of the key ones. We obviously can't be involved in all of them, but there are many of them that are out there. I do not intend to go through each and every one of these, but to give you really an overview of the different types of organizations and initiatives that they exist. So each of those initiatives can be really split into one of 4 different focus areas, depending on the reason why they've been set up. So a number of them are really looking at technology and innovation, how we can scale up the development and implementation of the breakthrough technologies that are needed to sort of to support their development and to get them commercially available as soon as possible. There's another set of initiatives that are really looking at this from a finance and investment side, because we know that the transition to a reduced carbon steel industry is going to require huge investments in the industry itself, but also in related industries. So we need a lot of renewable energy, for example. So it's sort of all the money that's needed for these areas. And the banking communities and investment communities also have requirements on them and how they're supposed to be focusing on reducing their greenhouse gas and CO2 emissions. The third focus area is looking at demand creation. So while there's a lot of people trying to make this green steel available, are there customers out there who are willing, who are wanting to have low carbon steel products? And if so, are they willing to pay a premium to help speed up the transition? This is looking both at from a public government perspective, but also from private procurement. We hear the term often about green steel, we know that really it's not looking at all environmental credentials about steel. It's looking at low carbon emission steel. But the green steel term has really sort of taken hold, and many organizations and initiatives are referring to it in this way. And then the fourth area is about definitions and methodologies. And this is probably one of the biggest areas which covers many of the different initiatives, because everybody needs to know how they are measuring the emissions from the industry, and also, defining what is being referred to. Is it a low carbon emission steel product? Is it a near zero or a net zero steel product? So all of these different aspects need to be defined, and methodologies developed, so that they can actually calculate what those emissions are. So if we look at the different initiatives that we've seen, they're also focusing on different aspects of the steel value chain. So some of them will be focusing on the steel company as a whole, and what you're responsible for in all the different regions that you are existing in. Some of them look at a specific site, where the steel is being produced. And others will look at a very specific product. So if you're selling some reinforcing bar, you're selling some galvanized coil, the initiatives really then are focusing on measuring your CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions for that specific product. So it's quite important that there is a differentiation and an understanding to know which of these initiatives is focusing on the company, the site, or the product level, or maybe a combination of them. So while there are a lot of initiatives out there, there are often good reasons why there are these differences that exist. There are also other initiatives which are focusing on a regulatory aspect. So if you're looking at how you're trading materials, and if you're being forced by some regulations to provide specific numbers based on their own specific methodologies. So in terms of the labeling of products, of green steel or low carbon emission steel products, it's obviously being driven, as I've mentioned, by different stakeholders. This could be in terms of customers. So this is in all different sectors we're seeing now. I think it's very big in the construction and automotive sectors, also in packaging, in the shipping sector, in pipelines and things. It's really an area that is been growing quite rapidly. The finance sector, regulators, really anyone within the value chain. Also looking at the civil society, and how we are being perceived as an industry is also quite important. And so if people are trying to decide whether or not they're looking at having some green steel products, how actually can this be demonstrated? What systems are in place for customers, for other stakeholders to understand whether or not these products are what they say they are? And this then leads a lot into different types of green product labeling. So these standardization or certification systems are in place in order to be able to help people to say, okay, this is my stamp of approval. It's aligned with a certain system or a standard that's currently in place, and it gives then some confidence to the consumer, to the stakeholders, about the product being what it says it is. However, as we've seen, there are many different initiatives that are there who are providing this as a service. So it's not always easy for the consumer to understand which ones are the most relevant ones to follow. They all need to rely on a specific definition of what is a low carbon, a green steel, or a near zero emission steel product, depending on how that initiative has defined what their criteria are. Also, if they're providing some type of certification, these initiatives will need to rely on thresholds. So it's at what point can you set a threshold for your greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's for your company, for your site, or for your product, how this can be then shown. Typically, a good example of how this is done in other sectors is for your, in the white goods sector, for your washing machine, for your fridges, it has the energy rating labels from A+ or A star, and then you can see going down to levels A, B, C, which one and how they perform. The consumer doesn't necessarily need to understand what each of those bands means. They just know that the higher up, the higher the A value is, then the better performing the product is. So there are a number of these initiatives. There's the International Energy Agency, who helps to provide some of the sort of the scientific knowledge behind the emissions of today and what are the emissions possible for future steel production. And then based on often on the IEA's data, but also on other sources, then there are different initiatives which have set up certification programs to help define and to label green steel products, or also the actual production facility. I've put some of them here on the slide. We have the Global Steel Climate Council, which sets thresholds for different steel products. The Responsible Steel Standard, which includes greenhouse gas emissions as one of 13 of their principles. That covers other social and environmental topics as well. We're going to hear shortly from Gerhard about the LESS standard. There's the CARES one, which is focusing on construction products. So there's a number of different ones which are out there. The other areas is looking at how these different systems can be compared against each other. So if you're purchasing a product which has got a GSCC stamp of approval, is that equivalent to a product which has got a responsible steel stamp of approval from a greenhouse gas perspective? So it's very much, different solutions that are out there. They're often relevant in different sectors or different markets. But there's, work being done to try and see how these are all aligned. So in addition to these sort of more global initiatives and certification systems, there are also what we are seeing increasingly are green steel product offerings, which come directly from the steel companies. So if we want to meet these objectives today of having low greenhouse gas emission steel products, then this can be done already with technologies today, focusing on using higher scrap proportions or looking at using renewable electricity. So there are some sort of products being sold showing those credentials, but also there are a number of other products where we're looking at how we can make reductions in the steel production sites and then attribute those reductions to a certain proportion of the products that you're selling. So here are just some of the steel companies' green steel products. So each of these different logos here represents a different product from a steel company around the world. Often you can see the word green is included in there, or zero steel, and there's various different names which are being used to describe what these green steel products are. Some of them will be their actual emissions of the product of what's happening on a specific production site. But some of them are systems that have been put in place to help capture the benefits of making reductions in part of the steel company's production plants, and how these can be attributed to specific products and sold with a premium. So these are ones, some of those were existing sites with high scrap use and low energy carbon sources. But the other aspects are, the other products are how we're allocating greenhouse gas emissions. And this is done often, from what's called nowadays a mass balance or a book and claim approach. And this is how you can enable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from projects to be combined and then associated with specific products and then sold to the customer in the form of certificates. And it's a similar thing that many people will be familiar with is when you're flying in an aeroplane, you can pay an extra premium to say you've offset your CO2 emissions. So it's looking similar things, a similar system, but for the steel products. So that's something where there's quite a significant amount of work ongoing. But it's quite clear for us at World Steel but also for many other organizations, that there is certainly a need for how we can align on methods and definitions. Everybody who has developed methodology believes that theirs is the right approach. Everybody's very keen to align, but following their own approach. Again, so we've decided that last year that we would develop a set of principles, which we've called the Steel Standards Principles. These were launched at COP last year, and it's basically the endorsement by different standard setting bodies, steel companies, organizations, to try to work together to harmonize and align on the different methodologies that we've seen at the beginning of the presentation. So we're very keen at working on this. We're currently carrying out an exercise to map all the different methodologies that we can to see where we have alignment amongst the methodologies to quantify the different emissions. So it's really a very collaborative approach to try to make sure, to see where we are already focusing on the same areas, where we're already trying to build this consensus, working together with all the organizations and the ISO standards bodies and the certification bodies to really try and see what is the best solution for accounting for emissions, while also bearing in mind that we're competing with other materials, and we need to make sure that when we're comparing steel with other materials, that again is compared on a like-for-like basis, so that we're also following similar rules in other market sectors, in the other metals, aluminium, for wood, for concrete, so that people who are choosing between materials can compare on the same basis. So this is something which is quite key and quite a big workload that we have, that we're working on now. But there are also, and many of these other initiatives that we've shown that are also focusing on trying to do a similar job. Here is just 4 of the ones that I picked, which were quite key ones currently that we're working together with. The Industrial Deep Decarbonization Initiative, which looks at setting greenhouse gas accounting rules for public procurement for steel, cement and concrete. So setting thresholds for governments to say they must purchase products which are low emitting greenhouse gas products. The Industrial Transitions Accelerator, again, they're looking across a whole multi-sector approach, which includes fuels, aviation, methanol, aluminium, cement and concrete and steel. And again, it's trying to find ways in which harmonization of methodologies can help a better understanding of where we are today and where improvements are most easily to be achieved. There's the Climate Club, which is made up of a number of or many different governments around the world, where they're promoting lead markets for near zero greenhouse gas emission steel and cement. Currently, their focus is, and again, looking at standardized methods. And then the last one here is Steel Zero. This one is more for private procurement, where it's signed up to by steel customers. And the requirement of those customers is to buy low carbon steel, 50% by 2030, but all of the steel and cement and concrete that they buy by 2050 has to be low carbon emission products. So you'll see that there is, these really are just a few examples of what's going on out there, the different areas that are being focused on, and the need we have as an industry to help educate these people who are developing these systems in terms of making sure that they're capturing the actual production technologies and also the future production technologies in the best way. So just finally, in terms of our role and the work that we're doing, we need to make sure as a global industry, as World Steel, that we're interacting as much as possible with the relevant international initiatives, whether it's to provide expertise and educate people, just the basics of steel making, to make sure that things that are being developed are globally applicable and technology neutral. While everyone thinks we should move to, scrap-based steel making everywhere, on a global level by 2050, we're still going to be making 50% of our steel through virgin iron ore and not through scrap, just due to the fact that it's available in products for a long time. So we also provide data. We collect data for steel production which includes our greenhouse gas emissions, so we can share that. And really then organising events where we're sharing best practice, the information that we've learned, and trying to get global consensus as much as possible on a number of these different topics. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and happy to take any questions, or here's my email address if you'd like to contact me in the future.
Thanks, Claire. We have received a number of questions. We won't be able to answer everything, but maybe I'll start with the first one. The first question is, due to the various standards and certifications that we have around green steel, do we see a path forward where all these standards would be, combining or coalescing, like, going forward? If so, what would be the main drivers?
Okay, so I think the steel standards principles that I mentioned, that we signed up to and launched at COP last year, it's actually, has increased in the past year. We've got over 50 signatories, and we're actually meeting next week in Switzerland. And the aim of this group is really to look at areas where we are currently aligned and areas where we need to try and see, are there some specific areas where we're not forcing or trying to push different methodologies or certification systems to change. But for example, one of the things that we would like to see is that maybe if everybody, in addition to how they currently report, if they additionally report on their crude steel emission level, then you would have a consistency by which you can compare and across the different methodologies. So it's looking at those common points that we can try to drive forward everybody at the same time, knowing that there are going to be specific rules for different sectors and different regions.
Thanks, Claire. We have time to answer one more question. The question is World Steel Association working with different governments to define these policies or incentives to grow the green steel market? And one of the second question on similar lines is that what could be we doing on the side of policy to drive demand for low carbon or green steel?
Okay, so on the policy level, as World Steel, we're a global organization, and so we get less involved on the policy perspectives. There are different solutions which are going to be relevant for different regions, for different sectors, and I think that's something which is taken forward more on a specific regional or national level within the policy arena. But I think that yes, it's important that we try to encourage people, the governments to work with the industry mainly, to make sure that the policies that are being implemented are implementable by the industry, not to lead to additional reporting or different methodologies of reporting on your greenhouse gas emissions, but to try and align what's already out there and the systems that are already existing to reduce the burden. Because with all these initiatives that I showed on one of the first slides, all these people are asking the same steel companies for information and data, but in slightly different or very different ways. And so there's a lot of burden being put on organizations already. So I think it's about harmonizing this as much as possible, will be our sort of encouragement for this on a policy level.
Thanks, Claire. With that, I would like to pass it to Anderson, where we can focus on the second PPT. We'll try to answer the remaining questions in the chat. Thank you.
Claire, thank you very much. And also thank you for your co-worker's lead article in the Iron and Steel Technology magazine this month by AIST. Very good presentation. I'd like to take this moment again to introduce our second moderator, Anderson Morlato. Anderson comes to us. Anderson comes to us from ArcelorMittal Group. He is the CTO and head of the CO2 technology and road mapping globally. Anderson has a diploma in metallurgical engineering, and he holds a master's degree in metallurgic and materials engineering from Federal University of Minas Gerais at Belo Horizonte, Brazil. He also holds an MBA by the University of Chicago. I will now turn the presentation over to Anderson for introduction of our next presenter.
Hello, thanks, Charlie. So I'd like to introduce you to Gerhard Endemann. He's the head of sustainability in the German Steel Association. Gerhard graduated as chemical engineer at the University of Dortmund, worked in the chemical industry and at the Research Institute BFI in Germany, which are the basis for more than 30 years of his experience in environmental protection and steelmaking. The main topics of his research work were on the field of environmental protection, byproducts, and water management at all the different steps of the steelmaking process. Since 2002, Mr. Endemann worked for the German Steel Associations, beginning in the Steel Institute, VDEH, and followed by the German Steel Association. Today, he is Director of Environmental and Sustainability Politics at German Steel Association again. Aside of his membership in several national and international committees, he chairs the material cycle committees at Eurofair, the European Steel Federation, and at BDI, the German Business Federation, as also Eurofair Sustainability Working Group for many years. During 2003-2004, Mr. Endemann was temporary staff of the United Nations Development Organization and worked as an international expert on environmental protection and circular economy in China. So discussions on sustainability, resource efficiency in the steel industry, including circular economy for sustainable production and use of steel, byproducts, secondary raw materials, are his daily business. So this is always linked to the questions of the present legal situation and where the train of politics and legislation is going to in Europe and Germany. So we are happy to have him. He will be presenting us today the Low Emission Steel Standard, which is an initiative of the German Steel Association, and it is the first standard for the classification of low emission steels in one of the world's largest steel producing countries, that is supported by both rounds of steel production and flanked by the government. This standard, named LAS, enables customers to compare the decarbonization efforts of both routes. Furthermore, the standard highlights both the status of the transformation and the transformative efforts undertaken on the path to near zero steel across all process routes. So I turn now to you, Gerard. Please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you very much for being here.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. It was much too long, but nevertheless, we still keep some times for the low emission steel standard, and I go to it strictly as quickly as possible. The agenda, we start with political motivation, some words on the green lead markets, then the low emission steel standard itself, and finally a summary and next steps. Yeah, starting with the political initiative. Our mission is shown here, and you can see that the German Steel Association, originally it's called Wirtschaftsvereinigung Stahl. We speak for the entire steel industry, are pioneers of the green transformation, active partners for politics and society, and stand up for climate neutral and competitive, broadly efficient steel location in Germany and in Europe. Some facts and figures. Germany is the largest steel producer in the EU. We have about 2,500 steel grades. Our production presently is 70% about BF-BOF route and about 30% of the BI-EAF. About 80,000 jobs are directly in the steel industry, and about 4 million jobs depend from the steel-intensive sectors. And we try to make the production the best conditions. Germany has an ambitious climate protection target, and this is only possible to achieve by green steel made in Germany. Finally, you see here the numbers for the total CO2 emissions and the portion of 164 million tons in the industry, of which about 51 million tons are in the steel industry. And this is a heavy argument to go on with greening our production and our industry. But nevertheless, I think Claire already mentioned it, that this premium material in the future will have a higher price, and we need someone who is willing to pay this price for this premium. And therefore, it is necessary to create a reliable demand for low emission steel. And also the politicians made clear that we have to bridge the gap until the low emission materials become the standard, and also to reduce public funding for the first initiatives and the first plants that are built to reduce finally the CO2 emission in the steel industry. So the basis should therefore be a certified label to differentiate between low emission on the one hand and conventional produced gray steel. And we also see, as Claire already mentioned, public procurement, public tenders, for example, as possible initiatives that could start on this. Although we already say that green steel or emission-reduced steel will be more expensive than gray steel, we have here a study made by BCG, and which shows that even if there are, this is the percentage of CO2 emission from steel in the total product emissions of this different products, the additional price or increase in the cost of the end product is quite low in comparison. So we believe that this would be possible and also acceptable finally for the final consumer. Nevertheless, with this background, we started our discussions and discussed how a clear definition would look like. And the first thing was to say we need compatibility with the market acceleration. So it should mirror the step-by-step transformation of the industry. It should have a high ambition in order also to get the improvement by, for example, NGOs and by governments. It must reward the transformation processes. It must be internationally connective. And circular economy would also be a big point. So anyone who already produces by use of 100% scrap should not have any disadvantage, but nevertheless, only the movement to use scrap should not alone lead to climate neutrality. That's one of the big points that we had to follow. And finally, that it should be credible is self-understanding. So with these ideas, we developed some first ideas and entered into discussions with different stakeholders. And it was good that in parallel also the Economic Affairs and Climate Protection Ministry in Germany was engaged and says, we want to develop the lead markets. What do we need for this? And what can we do for this? And they started a stakeholder dialogue. We hope it doesn't matter that police is just passing here. So we started the discussion in the stakeholder dialogue, and with this dialogue, the whole system and the idea for the system has been developed in detail. And you can imagine that there are a lot of discussions and many development that finally leads to the low emission steel standard that we have. You see here in April on the Hanover Fair, we launched LESS, and you can see here the minister and several representatives of the steel industry, and also from ministry and also for certification companies. LESS builds on the core of the principles of the proposal of the IEA. It is supported by almost the entire steel industry in Germany and also from our customers. A standard rule book has been developed. We now build a system owner who is called LESS ASBL, and LESS will be finally open to all steel producers in the EU and beyond. Nevertheless, we started from a German perspective, but as mentioned, it is located in Brussels, and first certification based on LESS is planned for the end of this year and the first quarter of 2025. And this is how it looks like finally. You see two labels here with nearly the same content. It contains the classification, and this means we have defined low emission classes A, B, C, D, and a near zero class. And we also declare the scrap share within the process. And what we additionally do is, because this is very important for our customers, we also give the product carbon footprint, or alternatively a GWP total according to environmental product declaration. And this was very important also for not only for the customers and the OEM producers, but also for the politicians, because they say we want to have this both. The classification system could be easy used. We can, for example, use this in public procurement to say we would like to have class C steel. But nevertheless, in order to calculate the product carbon footprint of the final product, we also need the carbon footprint. And this also showed that carbon footprint and classification system are not the same. This shows the limits that are relevant for the different classes. A to D is, as already mentioned, a low emission, and E is out of the system. It's business as usual or state of the art. And near zero is below A. What we did is finally to adapt the sliding scale to absolute definition of the NZEP as a starting point for the 5 categories of low emission steel production, but we finally extend it for practical implementation, including scope 3 upstream emissions, extending the boundary from crude steel to hot rolled, and consideration also, for example, of alloying steel. This is mirrored also here again. In this slide, this was the scope of the IEA, which was used as a starting point, and the extended scope of LESS is shown here. So including hot rolling, including scope 3 emissions, also alloying elements and the metallurgical, the secondary metallurgy. We have edited the byproducts, for example, allocation, which is only relevant for the present situation. But finally, if you make the decarbonization, it is not longer relevant finally. And consideration of additional emissions due to the adjustment of threshold values. This is a figure of the rule book that has been built on this basis, on the discussions and on the definition that we did. It references to existing technical standards, ISO, etc. So what was already mentioned by Claire, also the different standards, we took them up as far as possible, but nevertheless, some of them give some space for interpretation, and we tried to avoid this by using the rule book. And nevertheless, as it is made in Europe, we finally based also on EU legislation, in particular on the EU emission trading system, which was clear as it is requested by the European legislator. We give you some overview on the key design elements within the rule books. We have clearly defined allocation methods. In the rule book, we have an offset that is not allowed in the rule book. It is a physical standard, and I remember that there was a question in the Q&A area regarding mass balance, or for example, also book and claim. So mass balance is only possible under strict conditions. It's mainly, for example, for the development in parallel of decarbonization on an existing site, then you have to handle this somehow. But nevertheless, it is really very strict. And book and claim, for example, is not allowed. So it is physically been bonded to the location of the plant. We defined reference materials, but use this only to demonstrate the classification of reference plants. I will show you that in some minutes. The certification will be done by independent certification bodies. We have emission factors with as in the starting point based on eco-invent, but nevertheless, primary goes first. If the companies have primary data, then they have to use this and use the eco-invent data only to fill the gaps. And we developed a lot of adjustment rules, for example, on island agents. If we still have time, I will give some view on this too later on. Yeah, there we are already with the adjustment rules. We have the adjustment rules for alloying agents. This is because you all know that there's a need to have or to mirror different steels, different grades. But nevertheless, if you want to bring them up into one system, and you have some alloys that can double or triple your emission, then you have to handle this somehow, and therefore we have an adjustment rule. We have an adjustment rule for excess rolling, excess rolling mill input, and also for hot input into the DST. And nevertheless, these rules are clearly written, and this shows the map, as already mentioned, for the transformation steps. So once again, here shown the different limits, and what we use the reference plants for is how to show where they are in the moment. So in the moment, an integrated steel mill working according to the state of the art will be in class E. If we go on in the primary steel mating, if you will have a DRI in connection with an EAF, DRI driven with natural gas, we calculate with our reference plan that this will be in the level of B. No, C. I think this is a little bit moved. I'm sorry about this. Hopefully we can correct this in the final PDF. If you have DRI with EAF and with green electricity and also with hydrogen, then you will be able to get to level A. And finally, only if you also decarbonize or defossilize the upstream supply chain, then you will be able to end to near zero. And on the right hand, the reference EAF plant with the actual situation will already be at the border between D and E. EAF with green electricity will be at the border between C and B, and also the same if you want to enter to the near zero label, then you have to decarbonize also the upstream supply chain. Nevertheless, we do not use this as a calculation for the thresholds. We use it only to show where we finally can enter to. And this was finally also agreed by the stakeholders in the stakeholder dialogue. And nevertheless, it was heavily discussed within our group. And it was quite a big challenge to get both production routes on board and keep them on board all the time until the end of the discussions, also with requirements coming from ministry, from governments, and from NGOs and scientific boards and so on. So coming to the summary and the next steps, lead markets should be implemented as a matter of priority in the next legislative cycle in the EU and in Germany. And you may know that the European has been just elected. So we start the new legislative cycle here. In Germany, there will be the elections next year. And so it is clear when this should happen. We have a current concept of green steel markets and green steel labels, which are required to support the decarbonization. The low emission steel standard is a credible basis for this, and could be used as a valuable tool, for example, in new legislation or in requirements for public procurements or whatever. And the LESS supports the idea to enable interoperability between different green steel definitions and starts as outlined by the steel standard principles, already mentioned also by Claire. Nevertheless, we are talking to the colleagues of Responsible Steel and everyone else who is dealing with this. We are part of IDDI and so on. So we all have to push together to find system. It is, I think, must not be necessary to have one system finally, but to have systems that are finally coherent to each other. Next steps, the establishment of LESS, already mentioned, the starting of the mission of the new members in the beginning of 2025. The establishment of the certification system is now running and we will start in Q4. Afterwards, the certification will begin for the founding members and thereafter for new members. And the extension of the rulebook will also be proposed. So we already started a process thinking about ingot casting, forging, seamless pipe production and stainless steel production. There we are in the flow, and nevertheless, this will be proposed then to LESS ISBL, and they have to decide if this will be accepted. They will do a stakeholder dialogue on this and so on and so on. And with this, I'm through, and hopefully we keep some time left for the discussion.
Thank you, Gerhard. So yeah, the Q&A is full of questions. So let's see how we can accommodate the most. I think there is a bottom line question here is, do you see these thresholds changing, the CO2 threshold for labeling changing over time?
But from our intention, because of the basis where it started from, the EIA process, the decision was to set that labels, taking from the Paris Agreement, and so the labels should be kept as they are. This is the same from our idea for LESS, and nevertheless, there will be a review of the rule book and the rules and the adaptation rules and so on, which will be done periodically.
Excellent. So maybe we have, you know, I'm targeting to return it back to Charlie in 3 minutes. So I will challenge you to answer 2 questions in that time frame. One is, do you see any role of LESS in CBAM? Okay. And the other question is, how did the 2 routes react to this standard during the elaboration? Are they all in the same page with the standard, or there is still some internal discussions in Germany about that?
I'll start with the second question, because I've been quietly involved in this. You may imagine it was always a discussion. It was a discussion from the beginning, but nevertheless, both routes finally decided to go this way together, because they say, we want to make the decarbonization and the transformation for the whole steel industry. And this was also the reason why we enlarged the scope until hot rolling. So this also gives the possibility to include processes like the heating furnaces and so on, which also have to be decarbonized finally. And this is already not only possible by using electric power. For some technical reasons, you will also use gas firing. And then you are once again in the hydrogen area. This should be included. And we don't want to focus only on primary. which is finally done if you go the way from IEA, focusing only on crude steel. Sorry, can you repeat
If you see any role of less in CBAM?
Okay, yeah. So it is not intended to have less as a part of CBAM or something else. We try to include every legal requirement from the EU if there is somehow a reason why CBAM would refer somehow to it, or it is necessary to refer it, then it might be done. But this is finally it by less. But from our point of view, it is not intended to have there a connection between CBAM and less.
Excellent. Thank you, Gerhard. With that, Charlie, I return back to you. Thanks a lot again for having us.
Gerhard
Always welcome.
and Anderson, thank you very much. Anderson, indicate whether you're seeing my slides or not on the screen.
Yes, we see you. We see your screen back again.
Very good. We'd like to thank everyone for this presentation, your time, and indicate that you can find these webinars on the website here on the past webinars portion. You can go and review all of the AIST website. This AIST Resource Center holds over 10,000 full text documents, many presentations at AIS Tech, for example, and it has a keyword search capability to narrow your hunt for technical data. We also have future conferences, 3 indicated here, and many, many more identified through this website. It's a rolling calendar of our activities. We also do want to remind you that we have the major AIS Tech coming up in Nashville, Tennessee in May of 2025. And we do hope to see all of you there. Thank you for attending the webinar. We do look forward to seeing you at a future event. There are additional webinars planned by the Subcommittee of Decarbonization. Look for advertising and the calendar that we mentioned previously. Thank you all for your attention, our presenters for your presentations, and our moderators for your work here today. Have a good day.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.